Wrestling is one of the most unique performance arts and forms of entertainment of all time. Having been around for decades, wrestling has evolved and changed. Wrestlers today are stronger, faster, and capable of incredible feats that wrestlers from past generations could only dream of. And yet, the art those wrestlers of past generations created lives on. Professional wrestling is a wonderful thing because at its core, it's storytelling, and that story can be told in endless ways. Because of this evolution, we have witnessed an ever-changing conversation where fans around the world have asked the question, who is the greatest of all time? Today I'm going to be answering that question. The GOAT Argument is a series where each episode I will be looking at a certain wrestler's career and body of work and telling you why they are the greatest of all time. It doesn't matter whether I believe it or not. I am putting my personal opinions aside and making an indisputable case for the wrestler in question. Besides, we all know who I think the actual GOAT is. Today, we are going to make the argument why Bret Hart is the greatest professional wrestler of all time.
Oh, and by the way, Beaner Bronco Buster?
Yeah.
Where the hell did that come from?
Improv.
Oh, it's wonderful.
The world of wrestling is filled with characters who are larger than life. Because of this, wrestlers need to find ways to stick out from the rest. This can be done in endless ways. Maybe you bring a chainsaw to the ring. Maybe you dye your hair bright colors or create catchphrases so loud and catchy that they echo through arenas. In a business built on spectacle, being subtle is a gamble most wrestlers are not willing to take. But Bret Hart wasn't like most. Bret didn't need theatrics. He didn't need to raise his voice or create a spectacle. Bret stood out because he was excellent. A craftsman in its purest form, his precision, his pacing, his storytelling in the ring. It all spoke louder than any promo ever could. Bret didn't have to tell you he was the best, he just showed you. Bret Hart believed in pro wrestling, not as a circus, not as sports entertainment, but as an art form. Today, we're talking about the Hitman, a man who called himself the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. In an industry built on smoke and mirrors, Bret Hart's greatness was measured by what happened between the ropes. Because Bret Hart wanted you to feel something. He wanted you to believe that every hold mattered, every move had a purpose, and that when he locked in the sharpshooter, it wasn't just a finisher, it was the culmination of a story told the only way Bret knew how. Like many of the greats, Bret Hart was born into wrestling. When your father is the legendary Stu Hart and your childhood playground is the infamous Hart Dungeon, you don't really get to choose if you want to be a wrestler, you just are a wrestler. But he was more than just a wrestler. Bret was an artist, a storyteller. Wrestling wasn't his plan, it was his family's. Bret's plan was to take this craft that had passed from generation to generation and elevate it to heights we had never seen. And maybe that's part of what made Bret different. He didn't see wrestling as a fight. He saw it as a canvas. Bret took the discipline, the toughness, and yes, the pain that came with growing up in the dungeon, and turned it into something beautiful. His earliest days in Stampede Wrestling, they weren't flashy, they weren't glamorous, but they were a foundation that would prepare him to take on the world. Because before Bret became a world champion, before he headlined WrestleMania, before the sharpshooter became iconic, he was a kid from Calgary with something to prove. And that chip on his shoulder, it never left. It did not take long for Vince McMahon and the WWF to notice Bret Hart, quickly signing him in 1984. It's important to note that this was a time when the WWF wasn't exactly known for its love of smaller, technical wrestlers, so from the very beginning, Bret Hart had an uphill battle. The WWF even tried to give Bret Hart a cowboy gimmick, but Bret Hart insisted on just being himself, furthering the point of Bret not believing in theatrics. He knew from the very beginning that he was good enough to flourish on his own merit, and it did not take long for him to be proven right. Singles matches against Randy Savage, tag team matches with his real-life brother-in-law, Jim Neidhart, Bret was showing the world how undeniable he was and quickly becoming a favorite, not just among fans, but with WWF personnel as well, as Gorilla Monsoon would call Bret the excellence of execution. Again, I cannot emphasize enough how quickly it became clear to everyone how good Bret Hart was. He debuted in 1984, and while he didn't get a real shot at being a single star until 1991, which I know that sounds like a long time, we again have to remember that getting to the top was harder for guys like Bret in this time. He truly had to make himself undeniable. And I don't say that to diminish his work in this period. Bret Hart, whether he was working with Owen or Jim Neidhart, were one of the greatest tag teams of all time. You know, Bret may have been stuck in the tag division, but he didn't just settle and bide his time. He made the most of it and truly began to establish his legacy. But like I said, he made himself undeniable, and that became clear at SummerSlam 1991 when he had the best match of his career up to that point against Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship. Mr. Perfect had been one of the best IC champions of all time, so it was more than fitting for him to pass the mantle to Bret Hart, who was widely seen as the next big thing. And Bret lived up to expectations. The IC title was seen as a stepping stone, with many of the greats using the title to show the company that they were ready for bigger things. Bret was no different and would constantly put on the best match of the night. Now, I want to pull back the curtain for a second. When I make these GOAT argument videos, I like to pick a theme that captures the essence of that wrestler. For The Undertaker, it was immersion, the way he made you believe. For Mick Foley, it was heart, his undying love for professional wrestling. But when I had to pick a theme for Bret Hart, I found myself struggling, because the truth is, Bret Hart is just good. Stupidly, relentlessly, fundamentally good, that's it. And as much as I wanted to wrap this video in some kind of deeper metaphor, like his dedication to the craft or his perfectionism, it all felt like I was overcomplicating it. Bret Hart doesn't need hyperbole. So here's what I'm going to do. Rather than trying to come up with some grand thesis about Bret Hart, I figured the best way to make my case is to let the matches do the talking. I've picked 4 matches that I think best showcase why Bret Hart is the GOAT. No hyperbole, no exaggeration, just 4 matches that if you watch them closely, tell you everything you need to know. We start at WrestleMania 8. This match is the pure personification of what storytelling in wrestling is supposed to be. You don't need to know the backstory, you don't need to know who Roddy Piper or Bret Hart are, you don't even need to know what the Intercontinental Championship is. Everything you need to know is told in the ring. It's all in the way they move, the way they look at each other, the way every hold, every punch, every pause is filled with tension and purpose. This is what I mean when I said in the intro that wrestlers today might be faster, stronger, more athletic, but the art that guys like Bret Hart created, that art is timeless. This match is proof of that. It's not about spectacle, it's not about flips or finishing moves, it's about 2 men telling a story of pride, respect, and competition through nothing more than wrestling. And this is what made Bret Hart so special. He simply understood the art of professional wrestling on a level that most never will. He knew that the audience, whether they were hardcore fans or someone watching for the first time, would feel it. Because Bret Hart didn't perform wrestling, he embodied wrestling. This match is a masterclass. It's wrestling in its purest, most beautiful form. And for me, it's where Bret Hart stopped being just a wrestler and became an artist. Next, we head to SummerSlam 1992, Wembley Stadium. 80,000 people packed into one of the most electric atmospheres wrestling has ever seen. This was a moment. The entire show was a moment. But it was punctuated by Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog for the Intercontinental Championship in the main event. Yes, this match main evented over Savage vs. Warrior and The Undertaker. The WWF knew that this was a special moment, but even more so, they knew that Bret Hart was capable of delivering. This match is a showcase of possibly Bret Hart's greatest strength, his ability to make the people around him better. Now, to be frank, Davey Boy Smith is not very good. Add on top of that the fact that he was high during the match, and you see exactly what I'm talking about. The phrase, so-and-so could have a good match with a broom, is often overused, but Bret Hart quite literally could, and this match is proof. Every move, every transition, every near fall was perfectly timed to pull the audience deeper into the match. Bret led this match from start to finish, not just putting on a performance, but constructing an emotional roller coaster that still holds up over 30 years later. And that's the brilliance of Bret Hart. When he stepped into a ring, nothing else mattered. All the outside BS in the wrestling business, it just didn't matter. Bret Hart elevated people and gave them the best matches of their entire career. He made his opponents look like heroes, while never once losing his own shine. At the end of this match, Bret did what only the greatest could do. He lost, but he left the ring as the biggest star in the building. Next, we move to WrestleMania 10, Bret Hart vs. Owen Hart. This match was a masterclass in psychology. If Bret's match with Piper showed how you can tell a story inside the ring, this match showed how every hold, every glance, and every breath can create a masterpiece. Everything in this match is so clean, so smooth, so well executed. Bret and Owen are obviously real-life brothers, so you could attribute the chemistry in this match to that, but we have seen countless brother vs. brother matches try to live up to this, and none of them have come close. There is just something so special about watching someone who you know cares. You watch this match and can just feel how well thought out everything is. As a fan, I want to know that these wrestlers care as much as I do, and the little details in this match tell me that Bret Hart absolutely does. And that's what makes this match stand apart. You could strip away the commentary, turn off the crowd noise, and just by watching their body language, you would still understand what is happening. That is the level of psychology Bret Hart operated on. He wanted to make the audience feel every ounce of tension and conflict that existed inside the ring. And when it was all said and done, once again, Bret Hart lost the match, but lost absolutely nothing as a wrestler. And now we arrive at WrestleMania 13, Bret Hart vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin. This is the match. The match that redefined not only Bret Hart's career, not only Stone Cold's career, but the entire trajectory of professional wrestling. If Bret vs. Piper was about storytelling, Bret vs. Bulldog was about elevation, and Bret vs. Owen was about psychology, this match was about violence. This was not a clean technical showcase. This was a fight, a gritty, bloody war of attrition where the lines between hero and villain completely dissolved in front of our eyes. And here's where Bret's genius truly shines. By 1997, Bret wasn't just the technician anymore. He was evolving into something darker, someone more desperate. Hart wasn't a clean-cut hero anymore. This was a man who felt the business and the fans slipping away from him, and he was willing to do whatever it took to claw it back. Austin, on the other hand, was a perfect foil, an anti-hero who refused to quit, refused to play by Bret's rules, and forced Bret Hart to sink to depths we'd never seen from him before. Bret didn't just wrestle Austin, he tortured him, he brutalized him, he dissected him like only Bret Hart could. That's why this match is one of the most important of all time. It wasn't just the double turn, it was the way Bret Hart masterfully pulled the audience exactly where he wanted them. They didn't boo because he was beating up their new favorite. They booed because they saw the real Bret Hart, the bitter, frustrated excellence of execution who was sick of being taken for granted. In that image of Austin, face drenched in blood, refusing to tap out, it became iconic, but it was Bret Hart who orchestrated it. Bret who gave Austin the platform to become a megastar while simultaneously cementing himself as the greatest storyteller the business has ever seen. This wasn't just a match, it was art. It was the culmination of everything Bret Hart stood for and everything the wrestling world was about to become. 4 matches, 4 different stories, 4 different opponents, and yet one undeniable truth. Bret Hart made them all feel special. Bret Hart didn't need anything extra to entertain you, to make you feel something. Bret Hart believed that what happened between the ropes was enough, and he was right. Bret Hart didn't change who he was for different eras or different opponents. Bret Hart made the business bend to him. He didn't just wrestle matches, he constructed them, he engineered them. Every hold, every reversal, every moment was crafted with purpose and respect for the craft, and maybe that's the key to Bret Hart's greatness. He didn't ask you to cheer for him, he didn't ask you to love him, he just asked you to watch, and when you did, you saw the best. Bret Hart is not the most charismatic wrestler of all time. He's not the most successful, the most famous, or the most beloved. But when you strip everything else away, when you boil wrestling down to its core, to its art, Bret Hart is the greatest there is, the greatest there was, and the greatest there ever will be. And that is why he is the greatest professional wrestler of all time.
What do you mean? These are my 407s.
Oh, they're 407s. Can I see them?
Yeah. These offer a lot of support.
Right.
Whoa, come on!